Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center in Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Firefly Credit Union, with locations throughout the Twin Cities, has proudly served Minnesotans since 1925. Firefly guides its members forward by delivering customized financial solutions to improve their lives in all aspects of banking. Firefly Credit Union. They light the way with life illuminated. Edina Eye, Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years. Now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services but dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome back to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller here with a return guest. And I don't know what his name is. We used to know him as Brian Freeman, and he's now the new Robert Ludlum, and we'll talk about that. And I just spoke to a friend who said, no, he's really Jason Reborn. So
it's my very own Bourne identity. That's right.
Yes, it is. It's certainly an evolution, and we'll call it the Bourne evolution. But Brian has written so many award-winning books, and adding the Robert Ludlum family of books to his repertoire is something we might have anticipated. I mean, you've won just about every award that a writer can win, and I'm really a fan of the Stride series, but you just finished a book a year ago called Thief River Falls, set right here in Minnesota, and we'll talk about that also. And you write psychological thrillers, but the Jason Bourne books are not really psychological thrillers. Those are just thrillers.
Yeah, more action adrenaline thrillers. That's right.
I would say. So let's talk about that. Tell us how you came to be the new Robert Ludlum, and the new book being The Bourne Evolution, which both Sharon and I have read, and we can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I love the cover on this one. They really did a beautiful job.
Oh, good.
You know, I honestly, I have been a Robert Ludlum fan and a Jason Bourne fan literally for 40 years. The Bourne Identity first came out back in 1980, and that's when I read it. And I got to say, if you had told me 40 years ago when I was 17 years old that one day I'd have my name sharing the cover with Robert Ludlum's name on a new Bourne book, I would have just thought you were crazy. So, but it really has been an amazing honor and an amazing experience for me. It all started a couple of years ago. I got a call from my agent telling me that Putnam had acquired the rights to the Bourne series and were doing a couple of new Bourne books, and they and the Ludlum estate were looking for a new writer to take over for Bourne. And so my agent asked if I was interested, and I said, yeah, I thought that would be an amazing opportunity. And I was sure that there were, dozens of other thriller writers that would have loved to have that chance. So they threw my hat into the ring, and it was kind of a black box after that. There was sort of dead silence for about 4 months or so. I didn't hear a thing. And I just assumed that they had decided to go another way, or certainly many authors that would have loved the opportunity. But then it was probably about February of last year. My agent called back. I was actually up in Duluth at the time getting ready to do a book event. And she told me, Putnam wants you for Bourne. And so I sat down and kind of mapped out what I wanted to do with the series. And I talked to the editor at Putnam and kind of explained my vision for how I would bring Bourne back into the modern era and take a 40-year-old series and really hope to make it feel current and fresh and modern. And he loved the concept, and I wrote a few sample chapters for the estate to take a look at, and they loved that. And from that point, we were off to the races. And I think, initially I got that news and I was thinking, oh, this is just such an amazing honor. But then you get a little intimidated at the idea of stepping into the shoes of both an author like Robert Ludlum and an iconic thriller hero like Jason Bourne. And if you think about it too much, you can let it drive you crazy. So the very first two words I put on my whiteboard when I was starting the book were "have fun," and that's what I did. I had an enormous amount of fun writing this book. It was just a great experience.
Well, there's also the aspect of reintroducing the readership to the Bourne series, because it was there and then he was gone and there was an empty space, and people did not know the Bourne series that well. Jason Bourne, the fact that Jason Bourne doesn't know where he came from, and because of a head injury. And so did you reread all the Bourne books before you jumped into the writing of it?
I did, and there have been so many iterations of Jason Bourne over the years. I mean, Robert Ludlum did 3 Jason Bourne novels, but the last one was only in 1990. And then after Ludlum passed away, Eric von Lustbader took over. He actually wrote 11 Bourne novels through 2 or 3 years ago. And then, of course, you have all those Matt Damon movies that were so extraordinarily popular and really kind of cemented Bourne in the popular imagination. So, yeah, a lot of people that had a lot of different visions of what this character was and who Jason Bourne is. And for me, my goal all along was really to go back to Ludlum's original book, The Bourne Identity, and try to write a completely new story in the modern era that was very true to Bourne as a character, and try to get back to the roots of why this hero has endured as such an iconic figure in thriller literature.
And it's different from your normal thriller, and you haven't written just thrillers,
Right,
but
right.
you write psychological thrillers, a little bit of everything, and certainly in the Jonathan Stride series. And I have not read the new Jonathan Stride. Usually we get a copy before the broadcast when we have you on. It didn't work out this time, apparently. So we're flying blind on that one. But with the Bourne Evolution, you came up with the evil Medusa, the Threadstone, which has a ring of the past to it, the same Jason Bourne, and you brought in Abby Laurent, the writer, who had a large part to do with it, and you left it hanging at the end so that maybe Abby could be back in another one. And will there be another Bourne book from you?
There will. Actually, I'm working on the next Bourne novel right now. In fact, I took a break to talk to you, and I've been working on Bourne all day. So next summer, my next Bourne novel, The Bourne Treachery, will be coming out. And there were a lot. I've tried to put a lot of little tributes to the original novel, The Bourne Identity, in my book, so that for real fans of Ludlum and sort of connoisseurs of the series, they recognize fun little tips in there. So Treadstone, obviously a big part of the Bourne series. Medusa was in Ludlum's original book, and there's just little things throughout the book. Even the fact that there was a general named Villiers that was a main part of the Bourne identity in the original book, and now there's a wine bar in New York called Villiers that the characters go to. So there's all sorts of those sort of Easter eggs in the Bourne evolution, and even Abby Laurent as a character is kind of a tribute to what Ludlum was doing with the Bourne identity, because in the Bourne identity, Bourne meets this Canadian economist, Marie Saint-Jacques, and he and she are sort of at the heart of the novel. Well, similarly here, I ended up using a Canadian journalist, Abby Laurent, as kind of Bourne's counterpoint in this book. And the book even starts, and the early scenes are set in Quebec.
It starts in Quebec.
Right.
Yeah, but it also takes us to the District of Columbia. It also takes us to New York. It also takes us to Paris. It also takes us to some exotic islands and of your creation. So that also feeds the fans in terms of geographical locations that Americans can't even go to these days because we're not welcome there.
Yes, it's a globe-trotting book. That was kind of fun too.
And obviously, these are all places that you either visited or had visited in the past and know very well.
They are, which helped a lot. I wish I'd been able to go back to each one, during the course of writing the book. But I'd been to all the places, which certainly helped with my familiarity of them. And I wanted kind of that worldwide romance to it, because that has been a part of some of the Bourne books as well. And so I wanted that in the one that brings him back.
And those trips would have been IRS deductions also.
Well, there we go.
So that's even more important. Now, Miss Shirley was an interesting character. Tell us about Miss Shirley.
Yeah, Miss Shirley. She is certainly one of the most memorable characters I've had the pleasure of creating.
Devious and
and
sinister and ruthless.
Yes, she's sort of wonderfully over the top. I love her as a character, and I had a lot of fun, putting her on the page. And everyone who talks to me about the Bourne evolution, it doesn't take long before they start talking about Miss Shirley, because I think she's a huge part of the novel, and just I think when you have great extreme villains, it just kind of adds to the fun of a book like this.
And it certainly did, I think, in terms of the Bourne evolution. And you also play on events that people know of, real events, but sort of play off of, like the Las Vegas shooting of about 3 years ago. And it certainly was a factor in the Bourne evolution. So how do you intertwine all those things?
Yeah, there are definitely some ripped from the headlines elements in the Bourne book, which is true in a lot of my books. I mean, you find that in many of my Stride novels as well, that I sort of bring in some modern themes into the plots. And in the case of the Bourne evolution, it turned out to be sort of surprisingly prophetic. I mean, those kind of things sometimes can just take you by surprise. And the whole concept of a social media platform that's really designed to manipulate people's behavior. Well, that doesn't sound too outside the realm these days, does it? So I think a lot of people were reading this book and kind of feeling like it was painting a picture of something that's sort of really going on.
Well, I expect the next Bourne book will also feature an insane president, but don't let me plant any ideas in your head. Getting back to the Bourne evolution and Miss Shirley and her deviousness and sinister. Well, of course, she's gone in all probability from the future, but I'm sure you'll come up with something equally sinister for the next one. How do you move from Bourne to the Jonathan Stride books to your other books like Thief River Falls. Thief River Falls is a thriller of psychological means set here in Minnesota. And obviously, we're happy to have you as a resident of our state. Uh, but how do you do that? How do you move from those different locations? Are you schizophrenic? Is that it?
Well, it sometimes feels that way, particularly when I'm writing 3 books in a year. I did 3 books last year. I'm working on 3 books this year, and it's looking like that'll probably be true next year as well. Last year, I was working on The Bourne Evolution at the same time that I was doing Funeral for a Friend, the new Jonathan Stride novel, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. And so I would do 1 week on Bourne and 1 week on Stride, and switch back and forth, over the course of several months as I worked on both books, because the delivery deadlines were within a couple of weeks of each other. And I'd never attempted anything like that before, so I was a little nervous about how that process was going to go. But I think what helps is these things are all so different from each other. They're very, very different stories. They're very, very different characters. And for me, that's what I find sort of creatively energizing, is because I can be working on, a Bourne novel. And as we said, it's very action-based, very adrenaline-based. And then I put that down and I pick up, say, a Stride novel, and it's much more psychological. It's much more inside the heads of the characters and what's going on. And so it's like kind of working with a total different side of my mind. And I think that helps keep that process, very exciting, very inspirational.
And as I said, I haven't read Funeral for a Friend,
Sure.
but I know a little bit about it, having read some reviews. And speaking of reviews, you've been reviewed very well, including a big front page story in the Pioneer Press, among others. But that's about someone dying who makes a confession about a murder, and Jonathan Stride steps in there, and then they find a body buried in the deceased backyard, and it goes from there. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Stride, because Jonathan doesn't necessarily have to have as much blood and gore as Jason Bourne does. And
That's right. You're not gonna find a Miss Shirley in a Stride novel.
well, we might, but I'll be surprised to find her there. But your villains are sinister enough, and Jonathan is sharp enough as a detective to work his way through it, having gone through quite a few of the Stride books now. And you move from 1 week to the other. Do you find that difficult?
Yeah, it's very intense. I mean, there's no question around it. I mean, I look back on the years when I was doing 1 book in a year, and I kind of think, well, gosh, that sort of feels like a vacation now. So yeah, I mean, there's no way to not work on a couple of books simultaneously if you're going to try to get 3 books done in a year. So right now, I finished off a new standalone thriller called Infinite, which is going to be out next March. I'm really, really excited about that book. It's far and away the most unusual story that I've ever told, and yet it's very classically a Brian Freeman thriller. And right now I'm simultaneously working on the next Bourne novel and on the follow-up book to The Deep, Deep Snow, which was my Audible original from last year and a New York Times bestseller. It actually comes out in paperback in a couple of weeks. So I'm simultaneously going back and forth between, adrenaline fueled Jason Bourne and a female first person narrative in my next Audible book. So, again, very, very different stories and characters. And again, for me, that actually is what makes the process work. I think if all of these projects were very similar, it would be a lot harder to pick one down, put one down and pick another up, because I think they'd start to bleed over on each other. But the fact that these are such divergent characters and stories, I think that really helps me get through the process.
Well, one of the things I think that is very helpful to you is that you live with your first reader editor, and you and Marcia have a long-term marriage, and she also handles all the business end of the business, which is something that we're going to have her on and discuss with her. We've been trying for a couple of years, but we haven't quite hit that yet, but that's got to relieve a lot of the business burden on you so that you can just write and she handles the rest of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if I didn't have Marcia working with me on the business side and the events and all those kind of things, it would be really difficult to stay up to pace on the creative side of things. So the fact that I can have her taking over that side of the business is a huge advantage. And as you say, she's also my first reader and my first editor, and that also is a huge help, because she catches things that frankly I don't find editors in the publishing industry catching, and she's blessed with a tremendous memory that I am not blessed with, and so she always catches me on things that will slip right by me, but I can't get them by her, and that's a huge help.
So there really should be two names on the title of your books,
and she gets the first two words in every novel for Marcia.
Well, for Marcia, right. Now again, as I said, I am certainly wedded to, as a fan, to Jonathan Stride, but the pandemic has had to have an effect on book signings, and it's had to have an effect on you as a writer. So how has that affected you in the last year?
Yeah, it's obviously it's been huge for everyone. The impact for us has been it's not necessarily what you would always expect. From a writer's standpoint, obviously, stay at home and lockdowns and things doesn't necessarily change our day-to-day lives all that much, because that's kind of the writer's life anyway. On the other hand, I think the pandemic and all of the craziness of this year has sort of layered on a level of anxiety and stress and frustration and anger and nervousness for everyone in the population that gets in the way of creativity. I mean, I think if you talk to any artist, they would probably tell you that this has been a very difficult year in which to create things, because the real world is sort of pressing in on you in so many different and negative ways that it's hard to kind of push that real world aside and sort of lose yourself in the essence of the book. And then from an events standpoint, yeah, I mean, we had probably 30 library and bookstore events scheduled at the beginning of the year, and of course they all got canceled, and so we've been doing a lot more of these virtual events and Zoom events, and there too it's good and bad. I mean, I will tell you from a speaker's standpoint, doing a virtual event is much harder than doing a live event, because as a speaker you draw energy from the reactions of the audience, and that's partly what really kind of energizes a speaker when
much like teaching.
Yes,
when you're teaching, I have found in teaching that the fact that you have the students there and they really come up with the questions that you didn't anticipate, or you did, and it really fuels you. And I was wondering about that in terms of, I know that you're doing a lot of these virtual events and you have your own website, and people can go on there and sign up to communicate with you. And of course, that's got to take away from some of your writing time also.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, I think the teaching analogy is absolutely right. I mean, if when you're in a situation where you're used to interacting with an audience, the idea of just doing it as kind of a monologue is very different, and it's much harder. The advantage, though, is that by doing virtual events, it means that we can bring in readers from around the country and around the world who can now participate in events with us in a way that they never would have been able to do in the past. I mean, a lot of readers just plain live in places that from a practical standpoint, Marcia and I would never really be able to visit in person. Well, now they can actually be a part of the conversation, and I think that's great. So I would expect that even when the world settles down and gets back to normal, we're going to continue doing regular virtual events, so that people who aren't actually in the Midwest and that we can't get out and see locally can still have a way of interacting with us.
And yes, I agree with that, and it certainly has made a tremendous difference. and all of us. We have, as a matter of fact, on this show, been able to connect with people. We had a filmmaker from California, and we actually have another author coming on. It's an old friend of mine up in Maine, and we've been able to go places by Zoom that we couldn't do in the studio because we couldn't bring those people in. And within the next month, we're going to have a psychologist on, who I've known for many years, to talk about how to deal with the pandemic, how to deal with the political pressure, how to deal with all the pressures that we're feeling because of the fact that we are locked down and because of the really lack of knowledge. We don't know, if we go out, are we going to get it? Are we not going to get it, etc.
Yeah.
So it's enabled us to do that. And as you said, bring in people from other locales. So Thief River Falls, were you surprised at the, hold it up. I see you reach for it.
You knew I was grabbing for it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We've got you programmed pretty well. Were you surprised at the overwhelming success that book had? Because it was reviewed every place, and it's gotten such favorable reviews, as well as being, I'm sure, more financially responsible than you anticipated. So
yeah, Thief River Falls has just been an unbelievable hit. Amazon, it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, released a chart of their 10 best-selling mysteries and thrillers of 2020 so far, and they're, along with books by folks by John Grisham and David Baldacci and Harlan Coben and Stephen King. There was Thief River Falls in their top 10 list. So it's gotten an incredible reaction from readers, which I'm thrilled about, because for years people have always asked me, well, what's your favorite book? And I always struggle with that, because I like all of my books for different reasons. They have a kind of a different place in my heart. But I will say that between Thief River Falls and The Deep, Deep Snow, those are probably my two favorite novels of anything I've written. And it's because they really get to the heart of what I'm trying to do in my own thrillers, which is write, very compelling, twist-filled mysteries and thrillers, but that also have an emotional core to them, something that's kind of take hold of your heart and wrap you up in the stories of these characters. And I think both of those books really do that.
now I'm also a fan of Frost Easton. And what's happened to poor Frost? I haven't seen him around for a while.
It's been a couple of years for my San Francisco hero, Frost Easton, and I feel bad because I left that poor man in somewhat dire straits at the end of the crooked street. I haven't forgotten about Frost. I definitely intend to go back and write another Frost Easton book. It's kind of a question of when do I have the time to slot in another book. My publisher who does the Frost books has been looking for some standalones, which is where Thief River Falls and Infinite have come from. And of course, adding Jason Bourne into the equation kind of threw another little wrinkle into my writing schedule. So it's been a little bit challenging, but I haven't forgotten Frost. I will get back.
Cut down your sleeping time. That's all I can say. And I normally you don't get out that much. By the way, I just want you to know that Jensen's is open, and they just put up a big tent, and we'll have to do a meal there pretty soon.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
Even in this, and I don't know if you've been getting out much at all.
No, not much. No, we've been kind of closeted inside.
And that's been one of the really plagues upon all of us. Because of the fear of really, what's happening to us. And so Infinite, tell us a little bit about that. It's coming out.
It's coming out March 1st, and it's a standalone thriller set in Chicago. Again, a very, very emotional book and a very unusual storyline. And I'll only hint out the fact that it involves a man who has gone through a horrific emotional experience in losing his wife, and begins to see what he thinks are images of himself everywhere he goes. And that starts to make him wonder what's really going on inside his head.
I don't know where you come up with all these things. I really don't. You have a psychedelic mind. We've been talking with one of our favorite authors, Brian Freeman, who actually probably has been writing while we're talking, making notes, and he works off a whiteboard. We found that out today. We didn't know that, but great way to put down ideas. And Jason Bourne's father, what can I say? Brian, we look forward to your books. I've got to get a hold of A Funeral for a Friend, and it's always a pleasure. I don't know how you do it, but keep it up.
Thank you, Alan.